Hello and welcome to today's episode of Journeys and Transformation. I'm super excited to bring this to you. We've been working with many of you on LinkedIn to get inputs on what to discuss today. And today's discussion is all about RPA, robotic process automation, flash in the pan or here to stay. I'm excited because we've assembled four panelists, four guests that I've brought in and sought out to get on today's conversation with you. And I'll introduce them in 1 second. I also want to thank you for joining us. I know there's a number of people on Zoom, which I can see now, and equally the folks that are joining us across the globe on Facebook Live. Thank you. Please send in your thoughts and comments. This is going to become a series. We'll take another one in roughly a month, and I'd love to hear more from you on the feedback around these. So we have four panelists today. First, I want to say hello to Craig LeClaire. And Craig is principal analyst at Forrester. Now, many of you have seen Forrester research before. They're one of the larger global research and advisory firms. And they serve many of you in the industry, many of the clients we work with, and certainly they've informed a little bit of our thinking as well. Craig, in particular, has spent the bulk of his career in automation and process transformation, and actually is their principal analyst and leads the work on robotic process automation. So really happy to have you here, Craig. Thank you. Thank you. Also, I've asked Puneet Uppal to join us from Mondelēz. Now, Mondelēz, as many of you know from the snacks you would have had in the middle of the night, is a large global manufacturer of foods. They're about a $26 billion company. They're global in nature. And Puneet actually runs much of the effort inside the company across robotic process automation, Six Sigma, process transformation in general. And I think brings a unique perspective from the eyes of a user of a business CXO that is dealing with RPA on the job, up and running. Then in turn, and welcome Puneet. And then in turn, I've asked Arvind to join us. Arvind Ramnani joins us from KeyBanc Capital Markets. And given much of the discussion and the inputs I've had on LinkedIn around this topic, I thought it'd be relevant to spend a little bit of time and get a perspective from someone who follows the industry and the companies within that from a financial perspective, understands their valuations, understands their growth trajectory, can compare it relative to what we've seen previously before. And Arvind obviously runs the IT research and is deeply involved in the robotic process automation research space. And then finally, I thought I'd bring in Riju Vashisht. Welcome, Riju. Riju actually runs the intelligent automation practice at Genpact, and in that capacity has worked with many of our clients and seen all sorts of ups and downs in the journey of implementing robotic process automation, what works, what doesn't work. She's also previously been the chief operating officer within our company for one of our vertical areas. And in that capacity has run not only automation, but process and process transformation. So has a broader view for how automation fits into the scheme of sort of the broader things. So they're the four guests. Today's conversation is a debate. It's a discussion. It's a conversation. And so with that, I want to get started. I also want to comment that this discussion is on three topics. By the way, those three topics were crowdsourced through you. So thank you for sending inputs if you did. The first topic is going to be RPA, old wine in a new bottle, or is it something fundamentally different? And we'll spend some time on that. We'll then move on to our second topic. And the second topic is really going to be around the challenges, the opportunities, the disillusionment, the ups and the downs, and really how do you plan pragmatically to apply RPA in a step one, step two, step three fashion. And then we'll move quickly through that to come to our last topic. Our third of three topics is going to be where is this going in the future? What does RPA look like in 3 years and 5 years? And how do we and you plan for that today? So with that, let me just get started. So I'm going to turn to our panelists and they'll each speak on this. And I'll probably start with first Craig, and then we'll move around quickly. Craig, flash in the pan or here to stay? What do you think?
It's here to stay. It's certainly been a bit flashy in the last year. So but I think the idea of having a digital workforce, one that gets more intelligent over time, is a long-term and stable proposition for a lot of companies.
I think you've said something that I've heard reinforced many times in the conversations I've had. I'll tell you, just to sort of provoke the thinking a little bit more, I've heard the reverse as well, which is, look, it's the easy stuff for the low-hanging fruit. What happens after that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There is certainly a focus right now, and I'll talk about this probably later, but these really simple, straightforward processes that are repetitive and highly structured. I have a rule of 5 that I'll probably talk about a little bit later. And those are the ones that are driving the market. You find those in high volume, and you have a bot that can cost $20,000 to build and offsets 3 or 4 people. And that's the gold of RPA right now. But that is a temporary state in that you're going to run out of those. And you're going to have to start looking at getting the bots more intelligent so that you can move the decision making out of strictly being coded in a script or a macro and move it to a more dynamic decision environment, which will probably be machine learning. So it has definitely got to climb the cognitive scale to be a long-term viable market. Our market forecasts assume that. So in other words, when we talk about a $3.3 billion market in 2022, that assumes that there is this progression of intelligence in RPA. But if it doesn't do that, then it is indeed a flash in the pan.
Excellent. And we'll come back to this topic of what's next in RPA, and this move to the future of cognitive is an important topic. Before we go there, let me switch gears a little bit, turn to you, Arvind. I know you've tracked this market for a while. I read last night one of your equity reports, and one of the companies, one of the software providers in the space. What's your take on the valuation? It's certainly really frothy from my perspective, but you do this on a day-to-day basis. What's your view? And you'll need to come off of mute, Arvind, so we can hear you as well. Thank you for that.
Okay, you can hear me now, I assume.
Perfect.
Great. So, at the surface, you look at Blue Prism. It has a valuation of 9 times sales. It seems really rich, but you gotta have to look at valuation in context with the growth rate. Blue Prism is growing well over 100%, and it looks like kind of no end in sight for this high growth. Similarly, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, all are growing well over 100%. The industry is expected to continue to see that type of growth over the next 2-3 years. So with that context, I think kind of the valuation is justified, and in fact at current levels even fairly attractive.
Fantastic. What a positive statement. Thank you for that. And so, look, I'm following a little bit of thread that I'm picking up in this conversation. Craig believes the market's going to grow exponentially, but it's based on the fact that RPA is going to move into cognitive services. For it to move into cognitive services, it's going to need to make the investments and have the valuations that are in play. And then I turn to you and you're saying, look, actually, it's probably an attractive buy at this stage, and so we should sort of be jumping in. And let me just take that thought forward one more step, and I'm going to turn to Puneet now, who's on the other side of the fence, and he's inside a corporation, and he's implementing it at scale, and he's learning as we go along. Puneet, what's the view from your world?
So great dialogue. I think my view of the world is a little different. For me, what is here to stay is not RPA. For me, what is here to stay is the problem it is trying to solve. The problem for me that it is trying to solve is simplification and standardization of my processes, and then automating some of that to convert human FTE to digital FTE. If I cannot get the first part right, which is the standardization and simplification, if the solution providers are not able to come forth and tell me how to do that without spending too much of money, there is no scale. That 3 to 4 people to a bot ratio that was spoken to earlier does not exist, quite frankly. And in corporations like ours, which have been built over the last 100 years through hundreds of acquisitions of portfolios and products and brands and companies, without serious investments in the back office and systems to integrate and make a process look homogeneous, I don't know where to apply it and by how much. And if I'm going to have to spend, $50,000 to implement a $20,000 bot, I'd rather go with a person, with a human FTE. It is easier and cheaper to train.
Interesting perspective. Look, I mean, this is an amazing discussion. We start with amazing opportunities ahead of us that's predicated on growth. Growth is easy to see in the past behavior. We turn on, we get a perspective from one enterprise on the ground. There's some challenges in the making and there's some work to be done to get it up and running. So with that, I turn to Riju, you. Now, you've done a bunch of these things and I've seen you sort of, both be elated and pull your hair out in some of these implementations. Give us a perspective of what it takes to get it right, because if we get it right, we realize the value that we've all talked about. And we get it wrong, then we're down a different trajectory. What's your perspective?
So one of the basic things is that RPA is supposed to be that wonder drug which is supposed to keep you young. And when you walk in, you think that I'm going to have this magic potion and tomorrow I'm going to look like Cinderella. But that doesn't happen because this requires hard work. So RPA is more like vitamins. You have to think about how to take your vitamins, what to take daily, etc., etc. So with that context, there are three types of clients. There are ones who are sort of, under extreme pressure to get those two bots running. And these clients are forever in a pilot mode. So that's about 30% of the client base at any point in time. Then you have the next 40%. These are people who tried. They were in the pilot camp earlier and couldn't scale it up, couldn't industrialize it, and now are on a rebound. So they're changing one of the levers of the equation. They're either changing the provider or the implementer, or they're changing the user of that service. And the third group is the group which is in industrialization mode. These guys got it right. So obviously the third group did something right, and the first and the second group did. So some of the things that the third group got right was, one, think big but start small. Look at your end-to-end processes and identify the opportunity that exists across multiple process steps rather than trying to automate a FTE. Because the equation is man hours saved, people try to go and automate an FTE. No, you have to automate work. And then you have to find common pieces of work across multiple people and then figure out how do you get it going. So it's about the approach. It's about what's the journey that you're thinking of. And it's about bracing yourself to have a few bumps along the road.
Fantastic. I love some of the analogies you threw in, and I think if I could re-summarize the last statement, I think it is all about being on a journey. It's not about RPA being the destination. And I think, overall, folks that approach it as a part of a larger journey, I think are much likely to get much further ahead with it than those that think about it as a one-stop end all. And so I think that's a fantastic point. I'm going to use that, if you will, to transition into the second topic, because I think what we just talked about is, look, lots of opportunities, great valuations, good growth trajectory, but hey, is it real? Is it happening? Are we able to realize value? And then I think in balance, Riju, you made some great points about the fact that it's not what you do, it's how you do it, it's how you approach it that makes the fundamental difference. So let's pick that up. How do we approach RPA to get it right? And one of the ways I think about it is, look, you're going to play college football. Concussions is just part of the game. Or is it? So talk to us a little bit about the 40% and the 30%. Riju, and I'll start with you on, what's the difference between people that are disillusioned and clients that are elated?
I think the first thing is, what is the metric of success that you put for your effort? So the metric of success is, let me show off 10 bots, then you're going to be disillusioned, because sooner or later someone's going to turn up and ask you, where did you spend the money and what happened with it? But if the metric of success is, what is the ROI, like any business decision, on this decision? Then you will chase the ROI equation. You will find out what are the inputs to the ROI equation, which is, what are you automating? How fast can you automate it? And how sustainable it is? And how do you enhance the automation potential by looking at cognitive elements pre or post the process to really look at an end-to-end process chain. Other side of the equation is the diagnostic that you have used to figure out what to automate. And there are a number of capabilities now in the market, whether you talk of process discovery, process mining, to figure out what exactly is happening in the process so that you're not going wrong in all these places, to identify the potential for automation. Lastly, it's about, do your bots come to work? Because Clair said that you're going to have digital workforce and you're going to have human workforce. So there is a lot of controls that we put in to make sure that human workforce comes to work. And so do you have some sort of an arrangement by which you are able to see if the digital workforce is coming to work? Is it properly utilized? What kind of command and control procedures you have, and what are you doing with all that data so that you're setting yourself up for the longer term?
Great practical tips, if you will, 1, 2, 3, on how to sort of get started. And I love that thinking. Let me make that real now and shift to Puneet. And Puneet, you've already deployed it. You're up and running. You've done many other variations of automation process transformation before. What's the view from your side? Is it real? Is it delivering value? Why or why not?
So definitely, on a positive tone, I will say that it is delivering value. I do see tasks that were reluctantly done by human beings, happily being done by bots now, right? So that transformation is real. It is doable. What we are experimenting with and learning also is that we need to change our mindset as operators and as runners of operation, that you can allow these bots to run on Saturdays and Sundays and at off-peak times, right? That's how you drive the utilization up. But for me, the core goes back to what Riju was still saying, which is, number one, you have to approach it as a solution to a problem of the process. It is not a solution to the problem of how many FTE you have. How many FTE you have is an outcome of a problem that is upstream, which is the classic case of the health of your process. If you're able to drive that process to scale, if you're able to simplify that process, eliminate waste from that process, not write algorithms to automate garbage production, then you'll be better off. And that's where our challenge is, day in and day out, working with our markets, working with our businesses to drive that value and drive that thinking. Once you have that, I do see the value. The ROI is good. The development cycle is short. It is very determined. It is very fixated on a certain part of the process where you have been able to develop scale now. And at the end, we are now beginning to look at dashboards which are talking about things like utilization, conversion of uptime of that bot license into how many digital hours am I getting before I get to digital FTE and divided by 2,000 or whatever is that number for a year. I'm getting data on uptime. I'm getting data on business exceptions and system exceptions. So I'm able to feed that information back into the business. Guys, don't raise so many exceptions in how you conduct this process if you want the bot to work. So, we are going through that learning, and it is immense. And I think it will take some time before it settles down.
But learning it is, isn't it, Puneet? I mean, two things that I just struck the chord with me. One is make the right bets or pick the right opportunities to go after with RPA. As you said, it's not the answer. You got to go after the question, and it's not the answer to every single question. I think the other thing you said, and you started with this, was change management. It's such an important part of getting this up and running and getting it right. Loved your kind of visual analogy of the happy bot, if you will.
Sanjay, if I could just jump in here. I mean, having looked at kind of multiple business trends, whether it's ERP or even the internet or cloud or mobile, I kind of look at these RP as no different in the sense that, kind of the early adopters, there's a big delta between those who see a lot of success. So, some of my checks have indicated, folks have been able to put 700, 800 bots within the organization. A vast majority of people I speak to tell me that the bot implementation is fairly small. It's maybe 20 or 30 bots, and I think kind of the folks who are early adopters, it just depends on the level of commitment and the level of flexibility that they have. And in 2 or 3 years' time, I think it'll just be natural for people to have much larger implementations. I mean, similar to what we saw with prior trends.
I think it's fantastic, Arvind. Let me push on that. Help me with the math. Okay, so we're hearing today 20 to 30 bots per Fortune 500 company. There's 500 of those. Maybe you go to Fortune 1000. There's 1,000 of those companies. That's 30 bots times 1,000. What does it take? What does it take to justify the valuation in the number of bots per Fortune 500 company? Clearly, 20 doesn't get us there. What's the view in your mind? Help us with the math.
I mean, I think it really depends on the organization. I think kind of full success is when you've had at least 10 or 15% penetration within an organization. So it really depends on the headcount within an organization. Some Fortune 500 companies are more essentially people intensive, and some are less people intensive. But if you have anywhere from 10 to 25% of your workforce using bots, I think that's, in my head, very good penetration. And when it's yeah.
Got it. So Arvind, your view to a CEO of a corporation would be, look, if you have 100,000 employees, plan on 75-25. I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm also just trying to get a quick view of the world. Shifting gears, Craig, previously I saw you wrote a lot on BPM. And as we think about this area of RPA and these, where's the boundary? Is it cognitive? And before we even get to cognitive, what does it do to the BPM, business process management market? And is that now one and the same, or is that different?
Yeah, no, it is different. They have different approaches to how they were designed. BPM was really out of the modernization. I'm going to build a new orchestration for an end-to-end process. So it was built with much more sophisticated application design, IDE environments, for building UIs, for dealing with visualization of APIs, for much more intricate process mapping than you get with most of the RPA tools. So they were really built from a different philosophy. RPA was built with a more tactical perspective. I don't care about modernizing the process. In fact, my talent is that you don't have to even think about that. Let's just record or understand what the human's doing, and we'll build a bot to replace that. So it's more of a repair the pothole rather than rip up the road system approach. So very, very different philosophies. There is a bit of disruption going on. There's in one of the best movies of all time, The Godfather, there was a quote, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You're familiar with that one? And I think that a lot of the BPM providers are doing that. They're partnering with the top RPA platforms. And I think it's to keep an eye on them more than anything else. There is more points of integration and complementary aspects to it, though, than I think many realize. I've seen bots really just work off the queues that are set up and managed by the broader BPM platform. They all work, mostly coming from the old workflow days, is moving work from one queue to another, and you have humans that work, return and get work from a queue. Well, a lot of times bots are just taking the place of those humans. So it's subservient to the overall orchestration. Secondly, bots fail. Their talent is interacting through existing UIs and applications. Well, those change a lot, so they fail. Being able to route around failed bots is a use case I've seen where BPM will, route work to a human queue that remains. And I think the most important, area where they're complementary is in the area of middleware for legacy systems. So, you have web services, APIs that are fired off by BPM steps. Well, what if you want to get to an application that doesn't have an API? What if you want to go out and get data from core systems to populate forms, to do those kinds of things that RPA does really well? So it's a nice legacy environment middleware that is very, very complementary to BPM. But over time, you're going to see, and you're already seeing this, the semantics, the language coming out of the big BPM providers, and the RPA vendors are starting to sound a little bit more process-oriented, a little more end-to-end. They're starting to talk about process mining. So there's definitely a vector towards, battle. And
Got it. Perfect, Greg. So graying at the edges today, two different spaces. Obviously, as this evolves, there's going to be a lot more sort of convergence over time. I'm going to leave it at that. What I'll do now is pick up the pace. We're going to do a quick, before I get to the third topic, we're going to do a quick segment. I call it rapid fire. And here's how it's going to go. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to expect a 1 word, 2 word, 5 word, quick response. And we're going to pick the pace up. We're just going to go around the panel and get some different perspectives. And then we're going to come back and talk about a topic 3. So first one, Riju, what is the average bots to FTE ratio? We heard all of this stuff, but what do you see?
All right, so I think you start off pretty bad. I know Puneet's smiling. This is a conversation we and I have had so many times, and this is rapid fire. So it would be about 1.3 to max 2.1. There is a lot of potential there to improve it, but you have to really go and mine your processes to figure out, how do you get it.
Fantastic. 1.3 to 2.1. I think you and Arvind were saying two different things. I'm not going to combine them. But if I had to, Arvind says 75-25. You're saying 1.3 to 2 to 1. Those are some amazing implications for if you are the CEO of a company, for what it means for you. I'll let you guys on the audience work with Riju and Arvind to try and reconcile that. But that's a really interesting thought. Question 2. Craig, do you agree with that? And by the way, you said something about your rule of 5. Can you just tell us what that is?
Yeah, the rule of 5 would violate your rapid fire segment here, but and it's confusing because when I say rule of 5, people expect there to be 5 rules, but there are only 3 rules, but they each have a 5 in them. So keep the number of decisions 5 or less for the process you're going to automate with RPA. Keep the number of apps that are involved 5 or less. Keep the number of clicks involved, or keystrokes, mouse movements to 500 or less. And you will find that's a level of simplicity that is perfect for where RPA is today. You find that in high transaction volume, and you're going to get the numbers that we just heard. I think there are 2 sets of numbers. There's a number for the attended world, for the contact center world, that's much lower. It might be 0.5 to 1. For the unattended or more the back office applications, you might see a little bit higher than that. I think you'll see 1.5 to 3.5, depending on the use case.
Okay, I love that 500, and the rule of 3 or the rule of 5. It's a great way to think. Okay, it's going to get a little tougher. I'm going to ask you to take a position on this. So let's assume that I were to put together a mutual fund of the top 10 software providers in RPA, weighted by their individual market valuations. Now we got that fund put together. I come to you and say, would you put 10% of your personal investable cash into it? Yes or no? And I know Arvind is smiling and he's just going to jump all over it. So go ahead first.
Yeah, I'd put in 20%.
Love it.
I mean,
love it.
This is early stage of a really, really exciting industry. I would just go all in.
Fantastic. Puneet?
No, I would not put any money.
Got it. Riju? 5%. You'd put half of what I asked you to put. Okay, got it. Craig?
I would actually not put any money in. I think the valuations are a little bit high. I believe completely in the category. I believe in its progression, but I'd want to see a little more evidence in embedding and incorporating the more intelligent components to get to that digital worker that can handle exceptions. You don't have to find as Riju said, that common work stream across N number of employees. That's going to be harder and harder to find. So give me some machine learning integration with some bots, and then I'd probably put in 30%.
Yeah.
Maybe
but Craig, I mean, if the only issue is like if you're concerned about valuation, once you have cognitive and machine learning, then valuations are basically going to move up. So
yeah. So we're going to come to that. We're going to come to that topic of where does RPA go next and where is cognitive going to fit in all of that.
It's not the first time that folks on your side of the house maybe understood. So they might go down first and then come up. These companies no one heard of 5 years ago. They were doing 10 million or 5 million, $3 million a year. Are they really worth $3 billion? Is any one of them worth $3 billion now? I struggle with that a little bit.
So folks, 2500. I don't know what that average is to. You can't average a debate because obviously it's on purpose very different discussions. But
can we turn it back to the panelist? Can we turn it back to the moderator?
Moderator is not supposed to be in the panel, so I'm going to stay out of it. But those are fantastic.
Sanjay, my feedback is if Arvind hadn't started with 20, probably he wouldn't have gotten 2 zeros.
By the way, 20. By the way, Arvind, you're going to have to disclose. And I don't want to get into your personal companies, etc. But you're going to have to disclose that you're a sell-side analyst.
Here's the thing: if you look at UiPath, right, as an example, which is valued at $3 billion, the run rate is this is a recurring revenue run rate is $140 million, and it's growing at over 100%. So I mean, and if you just look at kind of the other high growth like companies, particularly companies that are growing like 30 to 50%, they're valued at about like 8 times sales. So
you think it's justified. I mean, you think it's justified, and there's value here yet to be gotten. Arvind, let me move on.
Yeah.
To,
So if you look at historically. Yeah, if you look at historically, this thing looks like it's trading at 20 times. If you look at it 1 year out, if it's growing at 100%, it's not trading at 20 times, it's trading at 10 times.
So Arvind, I think that really gets us to the last part of the discussion. And I think you and everyone's actually commented on it, because all of this hinges on one thing, which is what's in the future. And, we talked about RPA cognitive, we talked about RPA and VPM, we talked about RPA as a starting point, we talked about these projected growth rates with assumptions built in. Let's spend some time on that. So I'd like to hear first from Craig. What's your view of RPA what's 3 years out from now? What happens in 3 years from now? What does it look like? And, and maybe there are 2 scenarios, and give us both scenarios.
Yeah, so I believe that it will progress intelligently. So I think you'll have areas like text analytics that are looking at unstructured content. You'll have areas like chatbot interaction with the bots. So you'll be able to have employees directly text into a bot to have actions occur. I think you're going to see IoT applications where sensor data is coming from machinery and so forth and getting massaged by predictive analytics and then firing off activity to bots. I think you're going to see all of those things coalesce over in 3 years.
Yeah.
What I didn't think before was that because the AI companies are coming in at higher valuations and collecting more money more easily, that they would basically add RPA automation to their stacks. And you're seeing some evidence of that. Some of the chatbot or conversational AI vendors, to use that term that they're using now, have added some level of automation to that. So I thought that would be the occurrence, because essentially the AI companies are maybe a little smarter and maybe had more money. But now with 200 million coming into a UiPath and those kinds of, I'm now more on the fence about who will own the intelligence. I think it's a good chance the RPA companies will.
It definitely puts the options on the table, doesn't it? So I think that's a great point. Let me turn around maybe to Puneet and get a view from sort of someone who's on the other side. And I'd ask the question this way. I think, if I recall exactly what you said, so let's take 3 examples in what you said. IoT, let's take, so the question is, as RPA comes to be in 3 years from now, Puneet, do you expect and I'm not asking about your specific company, but just, speaking for the industry at large, do you believe you're going to be buying IoT from, let's say, an SAP? You're going to be buying machine learning from, let's say, Google TensorFlow? Are you going to be buying chatbots from an AWS, Lex, Poly sort of infrastructure? Or are you going to be buying it from an RPA software vendor? Perspectives?
So I don't know who I will be buying it from. What I'll be definitely buying is value.
Yeah.
So almost to the point, there is so much of coming together of these technologies that almost everybody is coming to corporations like ours and clients like us for a share of that wallet, right? Who is able to put a better lipstick on the pig in hand? I don't know. And what will they be able to sell? I don't know. For me, it goes back to the value. If I see and my business stakeholder who is ultimately signing the check, right, for the capability, if that person sees the value, definitely yes, I think it is here to stay. I also think that companies like us with providers like yours and solution providers like the RPAs or RPA providers of the world or someone else, or business process management people of the world will also have to help us clean up our data. What am I going to do machine learning on? If there is no clean data, I don't know. What am I going to teach the computer? Bad data? I don't think so, right? I won't spend a penny on that. So that's one part of the equation. The second part of the equation, I think in 3 years' time, what I also worry about, Sanjay, and then you and I have spoken about this in the past, is how much risk do I put on this digital FTE and one platform and one company? Arvind says this will become it's a $3 billion company. What if something does something stupid and it goes bust overnight? And I have my order fulfillment entry processes riding on it. I'm not going to put my company's revenue at risk because nobody is now picking up a phone at UiPath or Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere or what have you. I'm not going to put my company's revenue at risk right now.
Fair point.
So right now, even if I am doing this bot work in some of those processes, I'm not letting my FTE go till I see this environment stable and scaled. So I'm not really actually realizing any value at this point because my risk is bigger.
Fair point.
That's what I'm thinking.
Fair point. And look, Puneet, I mean, it's perhaps not dissimilar from what I've heard from many of the Fortune 500 companies, which is, look, we're going to evaluate, we're going to observe, and we're going to pick the right solution for when the technologies are mature. It's too early to make the call on whether we're going to buy, from this category or that category. So that's definitely a great perspective, and it's a little different from what we heard earlier. Maybe, Riju, you can provide your thoughts on this topic. And by the way, just as a prelude to that, I think the topic of compliance is a tough one. The two of the biggest inputs I get from the clients that Riju and her team serve are the topic of enterprise security and compliance, and how does that operate in the world of RPA.
And with the GDPR in front of us and all that, right? Yeah.
It's exactly right. So that's a big one. And then I think the other one is, how do you actually get it up and running if you don't have the data cleaned, assimilated, deduped, normalized, and that whole data engineering equation. So those are both good points. Riju.
Yeah, so Sanjay, I look at a broader subject of automation. RPA is a subset of a larger superset of automation. And the parallel that I would draw is with the manufacturing industry. So you look back 20, 30 years ago, nobody would have imagined that you would be running car manufacturing factories with 0 workers. And those industries evolved to fairly complex engineering products. And if I, fast forward 30 years or whatever, where we are today, the things that we are grappling with are a combination of multitude of exceptions to processes. And a lot of those exceptions exist for good reasons. In the past, an exception was a bad thing. Today, we are all saying this exception is for a good reason because it's serving some purpose for an end customer. At least 20, 30% of the exceptions are there for good reasons. Then there is lots of unstructured data. In spite of, you try everything, it's going to exist. So I do believe that if you look at the concept of automation and break it down into how do I handle my unstructured data, how do I make sure that exceptions, are legal, become a way of life, and how do I enable processes to work in automated fashion with all of these anomalies? That throws open a very big window for cognitive inputs. Now, who's going to win the race is still out there to see. I think the jury's still out. But what basic task automation has done is that it's opened the door to thinking differently and opening the cognitive automation potential wider in small bites. It's out there to see what happens with this. But I do believe that it's a massive potential.
Thank you for that. Look, folks, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I want to say a couple other things. I think that one of the things I've heard the most about from people that are implementing, and these are clients and corporations, I'm not talking about the service provider or the software provider side of the house, is that they find that the world is moving towards artificial intelligence. The world is moving towards increasing automation and a broader digital journey. And RPA ends up being one of the easiest way to get started. And I think in that we're seeing significant traction across the industry. Clearly, there's a lot more work to be done around compliance, around stability, around environments, the overlaps with RPA, the evolution to cognitive. Much of that is ahead of us, and we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think it's important to sort of understand what it is today, be able to take advantage of it for what it is today, and importantly, at the same time, plan for what's coming up next. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our audience that is tuned in for this call. I wanted to thank Craig. I think of him as a deep thinker and an industry watcher. I want to give a shout out to Arvind, who I've been on panels with in a variety of investor forums, and I see him as someone who really follows capital markets closely and the valuations and the trajectories of not just RPA, but a set of technology companies. Thank you to our pragmatist, Puneet, who was obviously deployed and got it up and running and learned lessons through that journey and has a point of view of where it's headed. And then finally, Riju, thanks very much. You're the road warrior through all of this, and I've seen you down so many times and up so high. It's fantastic to kind of get that perspective from you. I do want to also just say, look, this is a one of a series. Please, if you want, tune into our next episode, and that's going to be on the topic of data analytics. It's a really important topic. We hear a lot about it, lots of challenges, yet lots of opportunities. I'll assemble a similar panel of different folks from different walks of life, and we look forward to a very engaging discussion. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.